Hello, hello, hello. Hey, everybody. I hope you guys are doing great. I'm going to be doing over the next several weeks, finishing the recording of my audiobook of my latest, I Believe in Freedom, Don't You? It's how to talk with family and friends about liberty. Because as Reagan said, if we lose freedom here, there is no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. So, what I'm going to be doing is uh, broadcasting live and recording this. Recording the audiobook, I'll be doing a lot of post editing of the book there um, to get that out. But if you want to order it now, you can actually go to believeinfreedom.us or you can go to hoyt.me. There's a lot of quick codes there. But I'm going to be recording the audiobook live over the next coming weeks and maybe get that done in about a month or so. So go ahead and hit record over here. And I may have to pause and breathe and do all that, but I'll obviously be getting all of that out in post-production. So if you guys want to leave a comment below, maybe I'll look up once in a while and see how I'm doing. All right. This first section here is from the book. It's from the 30 Foundational American Principles. There's several sections in the book, but you can check that out later on. Hi, Mandy. Just waved. 30 Foundational American Principles. Introduction. Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. Jesus Christ in Matthew 12:25. On June 16, 1858, Abraham Lincoln was selected by 1,000 delegates in Springfield, Illinois, as a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. That night, he delivered a speech titled, "A House Divided Cannot Stand," where he referred to Christ's words in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke of the Bible. Lincoln said in 1858, "It is my opinion slavery, will not cease until a crisis shall have been reached and passed. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other." Again, Abraham Lincoln in 1858. Abraham Lincoln knew America could not continue with such division. A brief look at headlines today tells us division has spread once again. Politics and politicians play a larger role in our lives, while personal responsibility and respect for individual rights. I'm going to say that again. Politics and politicians play a larger role in our lives, while personal responsibility and respect for individual rights are afterthoughts. Liberty lovers feel the squeeze as the state assumes more power. Strife and division are today's weapons of war as media, government, academia, big tech, and a willing populace are on the march. Too much time is spent discussing what divides us and not enough on what we have in common. Several key words and phrases describe the heartbeat of America. Freedom, liberty, independence, and land of the free are but a few. These words are supposed to have very specific and important meanings. They're not just slogans. They are the backbone and foundation of our republic. Freedom, liberty, and independence are what we all have in common, right? We're all Americans. We live in the land of the free, don't we? To believe otherwise goes against the very fabric that is America. If you don't believe in freedom, then you don't believe in America. To me, it's really that simple, and the time for choosing is at hand. We may debate policy nuances on taxes, energy, the welfare state, and business regulation, but there's one thing all Americans should have in common. I believe in freedom, don't you? At our core, at our country's foundational level, if only a portion of our population supports freedom, we have a problem. A nation divided against itself cannot stand, and the path we're on is unsustainable. Lines of division have been drawn on nearly every issue while a consistent pattern has emerged. Many Americans believe in freedom, liberty, and independence, but a growing segment of our population believes all level of government should make decisions for us, control our lives, overregulate our businesses, and tell us how to raise our families. While many of us prefer freedom and others fall prey to the false promises of tyranny, I believe there's an even larger group of Americans that haven't chosen a side. And that, my friends, is the reason I wrote this book. For those of you just joining on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, I'm actually doing a live recording of my audiobook, I Believe in Freedom, Don't You? Thanks for joining, John Stemberger. Hello, hello. Each of us has a circle of influence, and I believe it's time to have that talk with our family, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. The purpose of this book is to help with that conversation. Many of those around us say they believe in freedom, but can they articulate it? Can you? Do we as a society know what self-government looks like? There seems to be a massive disconnect There seems to be a massive disconnect between believing in freedom and how that manifests itself into everyday life, including politics. For example, how can you believe in freedom while supporting politics or candidates that push socialism? Is it any wonder we send our kids to government schools and they come out not knowing how it's supposed to work? When people refer to government officials as I'm going to say that again because I bumped the mic. When people refer to government officials as our leaders in Washington, or call our country a democracy, or talk about our First Amendment right to free speech, it's obvious they don't understand. Many of the principles and concepts in this book are about perspective. We must have the right perspective when discussing our rights, the Constitution, the proper role of government, and especially when facing big government statists bent on controlling people's lives. Without these foundational principles and perspectives, they will take advantage of the people's ignorance. I titled the book, I Believe in Freedom, Don't You? For a very important reason. When you have that talk with family and friends, establishing you're in agreement about support for freedom is important. The purpose of this book is to sharpen your perspective, help you articulate our foundational principles, and equip you with the tools necessary to pass freedom, liberty, and independence on to the next generation of Americans. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children. I'm going to say it again. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was like once in the United States where men were free. President Ronald Reagan. Etched in stone just outside the entrance to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. is the reminder, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. At every moment, with every news story, policy proposal, or candidate forum, you must choose liberty and freedom or the chains of tyranny. It really is that simple. You must decide upon which side of the argument you will stand. America is either the land of the free or it is not. You either believe unalienable rights are naturally yours or they are granted to you by the government. You either believe in a free market or you prefer a government-run economy where decisions are made for you by distant bureaucrats. You either believe you have the right to defend yourself or that everyone should be helpless and defenseless. The time for choosing is at hand. I believe in freedom. Don't you? All right, that was the introduction. Again, guys, thanks for joining me live here. I'm actually doing a recording of my audiobook. So over the next several days and weeks, I'm going to be doing this periodically, broadcasting it live, recording it over here. So I'll be doing a lot of the post-production and editing and all that. But okay, here we go. Principle number 1, our rights come from God. When giving a speech, making a video, hosting a radio show, or writing a book, the presenter typically doesn't reveal their most important point until the end. They prefer the build-up, the anticipation, and they like generating page views, higher video run times, and to keep people listening. In this book, I won't be employing any of those tactics as I'm presenting the most important point first. If you do not understand principle number 1, the rest of the book is irrelevant. It won't matter what the proper role of government is, why the founders declared independence from the king, why the Constitution was written, or why it's important to understand we are not a democracy. None of that will matter if you don't truly understand that your rights come from God and they are naturally yours. The simple fact you were born a human being means you have natural God-given human rights. I don't care where you call home, in what country you're a citizen, or to what flag you swear allegiance. You were born a free human being. Having the right perspective about the Bill of Rights, the limitations placed on government by the Constitution, or that our country is based on equal opportunity, not equal outcome, won't matter if you think your rights are granted to you by government. If you refuse to acknowledge and accept you have natural rights, you might as well affix chains to your wrists and live out your days a slave to those who you believe grant your rights. As a result of that dangerous perspective, you will wake up one day seeking permission to do things we take for granted today. Basic life functions will be turned over to those that know better as they make decisions for the common good on your behalf. Does this sound harsh? I'm simply drawing this stark contrast because you cannot have it both ways. Ye cannot serve two masters, as it is written. You cannot have natural God-given rights and look to the government for permission to defend yourself, to speak, or to worship God. I'm drawing this stark contrast because it's extremely important you understand the ramifications of adopting the wrong perspective. The slippery slope will devour you and your family's pursuit of happiness. In 1776, the colonists severed ties with the king and declared their independence to the world. The significance of this event cannot be overstated. The day before the Declaration of Independence was adopted, they were royal subjects of the King of England. The minute after voting, they were free, independent, and sovereign individuals. They stood up for themselves, and in that moment, they were completely free. They took complete responsibility for their lives and spoke on behalf of all humanity by declaring human beings have natural God-given rights. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson clearly communicated that our rights come from God, not man. Our rights are naturally ours. By our humanity alone, we have natural God-given rights. To think otherwise suggests we get our rights from another source. Does the government give us our rights? Does a bureaucrat? Do we wait for a new policy or law to find out what our rights are? No, not at all. The reason this perspective is so important is because if man... I'm going to say it again. The reason this perspective is so important is because if man grants us our rights, then man can take them away. If you rely on the government to grant rights, then the government can take them away or decide not to grant them. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Declaration of Independence. Let's define a few terms. Self-evident means not needing to be explained, obvious. It is obvious. It doesn't need to be explained. I bumped the thing. Let me say it again. It is obvious. It doesn't need to be explained. By your humanity alone, you have a natural and obvious right to life. You have a right to stay alive, which means you have a natural right to defend yourself. You don't have to get permission from anyone to defend your life, and you don't have to wait for someone else to do it. Unalienable means rights. Let me say it again. Unalienable means these rights cannot be taken or given away. They cannot be sold. They cannot be transferred. These basic fundamental natural God-given rights are yours and yours alone. And look at the root word, lien. We all know what a lien is. When someone puts a lien on your property, they lay claim to it. Your natural rights are unalienable. No one can put a lien on them. No one can lay claim to your rights. And your rights are unalienable. You cannot alienate them. They are yours. The phrase "among these are" means what's listed is not a complete list. Among our natural God-given rights are life, liberty, and property, a common phrase used by several writers, thinkers, and politicians of the era. That phraseology even made it to the second part of the Fifth Amendment as well as the 14th Amendment. Quote, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." End quote. The adoption of the Declaration of Independence modified that. The adoption of that declaration. Here's what happens when you're doing an audiobook. After a while, you start to get tired. So I'm probably going to do 2 sections of these at a time. I'll come back and do some a little bit later. But the adoption of the Declaration of Independence modified that common phrase with, "Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." For those of you just joining on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, I'm actually doing a live recording of my audiobook. You have a natural God-given right to remain alive, to enjoy freedom and liberty, to come and go and do as you please in your pursuit of happiness. Every single person on earth is free to enjoy these things as long as we do not infringe on the natural God-given rights of others. I'm not allowed to infringe on your rights, and you're not allowed to infringe on mine. This is why I'm triggered by Lee Greenwood's song, "God Bless the USA." Yes, it's a beautiful song, and it's certainly embraced as a national treasure, but there's a line in the lyrics I must correct. He says, "And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died who gave that right to me." I'm not sure if the men who died in the lyrics are referring to soldiers or the founders of the country, but in either case, they didn't give us the right to be free. The founders of the country recognized it, declared it to the world, and soldiers since have been fighting to protect it, but no man gave us our freedom. That's a gift endowed by our Creator. Yes, I'm being a little facetious about getting triggered by the lyrics. I gotta say it again because I bumped the mic. Yes, I'm being a little facetious about getting triggered by the lyrics. It's a beautiful song and a great reminder of our amazing country. I'm certainly not knocking it. By raising this seemingly innocuous point, I'm admitting that truly embodying the right perspective will make nuances like this stick out like a sore thumb. Throughout these 30 foundational American principles, I'll be showcasing a few more triggers that highlight the importance of having the right perspective. For example, a phenomenon we are seeing by several talking heads and elected representatives in Congress is the suggestion that several of their pet policy projects should be considered rights. They are attempting to confuse rights and privileges in the minds of voters. Once you understand the clear difference between them, their tactics will be obvious. A quick rule of thumb to distinguish a right. Let me say it again. A quick rule of thumb to distinguish a right from a privilege is that if it requires the labor of another, It's not a right. You have the right to speak your mind. You have the right to worship God as you see fit. You have the right to get together with others and peaceably assemble. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to privacy from government intrusion. These natural rights do not require anyone to do them for you. No one has to participate in order for those rights to be exercised. You can speak your mind without the help of anyone else. You don't need anyone else's involvement to defend yourself. On the contrary, many lately suggest we have the right to an education or to health care. While a society as a whole, or at least those in the majority, may believe it's a good idea to ensure everyone has access to an education and has access to health care, these are not rights. They are privileges. Privileges are offered by other people. Education or health care may be provided by someone. Let me say it again. Education or health care must be provided by someone. You're not just naturally educated, you have to be educated by someone else or by material produced by someone else. You don't naturally have health care must be provided. That's why your insurance company calls them providers. Having a right to something implies an expectation. I have a right to that. I expect that. I have a right to free speech. I expect to be able to speak freely. I don't have a right to your labor. I don't have a right to you doing something for me. If you do something for me, that's a privilege, and I should appreciate it. I don't have a right to it. I don't have a right to it. It's a privilege that you would do it for me. I most certainly cannot demand your labor. I must respect and honor it as a privilege granted to me. If as a society we were okay with expecting and demanding other people's labor to be provided to us, where would we draw the line? If you have a right to health care, do you also have a right to food? Must we force farmers to provide for you? Must we force grocery stores to give food to you? Must we force taxpayers to give more and more of their income to pay for things you should be doing for yourself? Do you have a right to transportation? Do you have the right to a car when you turn 16? Do you have a right to clothing? If someone wants to provide these, I'm going to say this again. If someone wants to provide these for me, that's a privilege. I don't have a right to expect someone else's labor. We believe in freedom, not coercion. Cling to these truths and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Believe me, they're going to try. God who gave us liberty, God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are a gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Thomas Jefferson. The fact of the matter is that you have been endowed by your Creator. You are free. By your humanity and mere existence on earth, you have natural, God-given, unalienable rights. God gave each and every one of us dominion over the earth. And when you read the list of things we have dominion over in the book of Genesis, it says nothing about dominating other men. Among many natural rights, we have a right to life, liberty, property, and the opportunity to pursue happiness. Do not ever forget the source of your rights. All right, that's awesome, guys. I'm going to conclude here for today. Actually, I may go live a little bit later, but what I'm doing, just to remind everybody, if you're watching live now, I am recording my audiobook of I Believe in Freedom, Don't You? It's available there's a quick link. You can do a free download at hoyt.me, or you can order the book at believeinfreedom.us. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you watch this later on, leave a comment below, and I'll try to follow